welcome to the show today, Leise Sandeman. Again, the show is Entrepreneurs, Business, and Finance, and we're very fortunate to have you here today. Thank goodness to Zoom and what's now the old-fashioned World Wide Web, because we're going to talk about AI and all the latest, but she's coming to us all the way from Denmark. And welcome to the show. Hello, Leise.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
And so you have spent quite a lot of time in the US, but you're originally from Denmark. How did you end up coming to the US? I know you've studied at our greatest institutions here and I think in the world, Harvard and MIT. How did you first end up coming to the US from Denmark?
Yeah, as I think it is with most people who end up a different place than where they're born, it looks like more of a straight line looking back than it felt going out. Right. So I started out, Denmark is a small Northern European country. And my first endeavor of getting outside the country's borders was for university. So I went to London after high school. And I think, the first time you move away from home, it kind of breaks this illusion about it's hard to move. Right. I realized actually you can move most places in the world if you just create the opportunities. And I think from then on, I had my eyes on the US, right? I think anyone who, wants to build something or thinks about kind of scale of changes. And I was always in the sustainability space. I always thought, well, US, the scale you can do things at are so big that if you want to have big impact, that's a great place to go. But very targetedly, it did take me kind of 7 years. I'd already lived outside Denmark when I kind of applied to graduate school at Harvard and came across the pond.
Your first work after college was in sustainability. Was that something you were interested in college? And then it progressed from there? Because obviously we'll talk more about your business, which is very exciting, but it's obviously a passion of yours, something that you're, and I'm glad to hear it. I think everybody should have this passion, really, but not everybody works in the space. We have other jobs we need people to do as well.
A- Absolutely. And I always say, my customers are material manufacturers in the steel, cement space, etc. Right? They do really important jobs every single day. Most people I meet care. Read a lot of news articles that say, oh, lots of people don't care. And I'm like, well, most of the people I meet, they care. It just can't be their top priority above everything else. But if most people like the planet we're on, it's a great planet. And I guess I, from the get-go, had the sustainability bug. But I also thought, surely, it can't be as hard as people are making it out to be, right? In academic institutions, people make it sound like Latin, right? Like sustainability and climate is this like inaccessible thing. And I was like, it's real stuff. It's like a plant manager who swaps out a fuel generator for an electrical one, right? This isn't highbrow or elitist. It's like very real practical changes that people make every day. That's a long-winded way of saying I started my career at McKinsey, a big consulting firm, but from the get-go was able to focus on sustainability with them, kind of looking at the intersection of sustainability and business. And how do you make sure that it also makes business sense?
Do you remember the day when you thought, wow, this is really interesting. I want to get involved in sustainability? It
Yeah,
doesn't always happen like that. Did the light go off, bulb go off one day, or you're just taking courses and then gradually you thought, when I'm going to hire McKinsey, try to get a job, and I'm going to try to do that there.
I think it probably almost happened when I was at McKinsey in consulting. I remember working for a big commercial and investment bank on their underwriting strategy into real estate and infrastructure, right? So we're talking, really high level, how are they giving loans out to infrastructure and real estate? And they were trying to figure out, well, how can we Paris align? The Paris Agreement, which now seems like a very old climate framework. How can we Paris align our portfolio and make sure it's more sustainable? And I was looking at the numbers and I was like, gosh, like half of emission it's 40% now is from built environment and from climate. And I was just shocked. Right. It was like some of these numbers I just didn't realize. And then I guess what's the more significant one? It kind of drove me down the supply chain of materials and the intersection with sustainability, what I call like real sustainability, right? Like rocks and cement and stuff that's being produced and emits emission when it's being produced. Spend a bit of time working in mining So heavy equipment, water waste, and fuel. And then my co-founder, Alex, would say I drank the Kool-Aid because I moved out to India to work with Tata Steel. And, a small girl from Copenhagen, when I stood in Jamshedpur and all I could see was steel, I think that's the light bulb moment. It's kind of my material point of no return. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing forever.
What were you interested in as a kid growing up? Obviously, you must have been a good student. At least at some point, you became one. And but you probably weren't, or were you thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to go to America. I'm going to start this company"? Or were you thinking about recess and things like that?
Yeah. Well, I was certainly a very nerdy child. That goes
And I
without
say that because you have
without
nerdy on your company too. So obviously, if you said
absolutely
nerdy, you must have been a good student. Yeah.
proudly nerdy. I always thought of nerdy as like obsessively enjoying something, and then meeting other people who also enjoy it. But I didn't think that I could start a business. My dad's an artist. My mom is a psychologist. Come from a background in a family where that really wasn't a conversation and didn't have any kind of immediate role models. And then, I mean, to be frank, looking around, also didn't see a lot of women in entrepreneurship in general. So it kind of double up. But I think what I did enjoy a lot as a kid was like organizing games in recess, like coming up with ideas and getting other people to play along with like my concept of some kind of a fantasy world. So for a while, I thought maybe I'd be a writer or a teacher because that were kind of my two examples of people who were doing that.
So it's been 2.5 years roughly since you founded the company?
We were a little generous on founding date. Really, it's been a year and a half.
Okay. And why don't you give an explanation? I mean, I can read what's on LinkedIn and I can read your bio. There's a lot of jargon because there's some technical aspects to it. So maybe give the layman's view, which you're helping companies make some steps like the one you gave an example of. I'm sure some are fairly straightforward and simple, and some are more complicated. And you're using AI to save our environment. And presumably they're doing things, because I heard you say, that are not extraordinarily expensive. Maybe they even save money in some cases. But because companies can't always afford things that are extraordinarily expensive because they won't be in business. So that's my layman's description of kind of what you're doing. But I know you can talk to it much better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for anyone listening to this right now, I'd say look around in the room you're sitting in, right? The paint on the wall, the glass window, this chair you're sitting on, the steel beams in the floor, the cement concrete foundation. Anyone who makes any of those materials is our potential customer. What we have been able to do at Pathways is generate what's called the product level footprint. So the window you're looking at, what was the exact environmental footprint of producing that window? For people who have more of a financial background, I think of it as like environmental capex, right? It's not what it emits in using it, it's what it emits in being produced in the first place. And this traditionally has been done manually, incredibly time consumingly by largely mostly consultants, right? So in some ways, Pathways is a simple business. We take stuff that used to be done manually and we do it automatically. And that's where obviously large language models and AI comes in and becomes incredibly valuable. The other thing here is it's boring work, right? I'm yet to meet someone inside a company who loves to collect utility bills and water bills and figure out how much electricity went into this exact metering. Like even people who are excited about sustainability, this isn't fun. So, I mean, we automate a lot of the boring part of sustainability.
Your business partner, how did you come to found this company together with your business partner, and how did you meet him?
Yeah. So my co-founder Alex, first of all, I mean, absolutely brilliant. I think one of the reasons why I came to the US in the first place and went to Harvard was because I knew I couldn't do any of this alone. Right. Some people can and they're great solo founders. I knew that for me this is a kind of a team sport. And me and Alex met in a class at MIT about starting your own business and entrepreneurship, taught by a great professor called Bill Orlett. 24 steps of disciplined entrepreneurship, I think it's called. And I guess from the get-go, just felt really values aligned. Both care a lot about the planet, but also the people we work with. value transparency, and were willing to kind of work hard. Because I mean, most of the time, building a company isn't glamorous at all, right? It's like unsexy and hard work. And we started out thinking of it more as a project every month, checking in, having feedback, talking about if this was something we wanted to do together, and kind of let it grow organically from there.
When you had a common thing I've gotten from people in the podcast is the value of mentors and listening to advice. And if I don't bring that up, it seems like everybody else brings it up. So I've started bringing it up, and because I think it's a good. And you have had you were teaching assistants with some very distinguished professors. I imagine that was a form of mentorship. Have you talk about not doing it yourself? So obviously you have your great business partner and co-founder, but would you share some about mentors or people that are giving you some advice or how that helped you in your journey or how it is helping you now?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a surprise that everyone brings it up. It's kind of, it's like the most foundational thing in some ways, right? It's like impossible to go there alone. I guess when I think back to when we were studying, working among others for a professor called Dick Kavanaugh, who came from more of an entrepreneurial background himself. And what did I really need at that time? I think more than anything, I needed people who believed that I could do it. Right? That mentorship kind of feels amorphous because it's not a particular piece of advice. It's just people looking at you and fundamentally believing that you can do it. And some of that was because I wasn't raised with a lot of entrepreneurship around me. So I was lacking more of these role models. Had a couple of very good friends who'd started companies, Anders, Rune, a few others who, even though they're kind of peers age-wise, also became mentors in that development process. And then I'd say now biggest mentors is probably my investors. So I'll give a little shout out to Vivian at Sakura and Stefania at Pi Labs. But people in your corner you can call when things are complex.
How did that start? Because that is a thing for most businesses to start up. Where's the capital come from to pay the bills, to develop whatever? Do you have software that you've developed? Or are you using other people's software? Or what are your expenses?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, we are, so to speak, a very classic venture-backed startup, right? So you can start a lot of different types of businesses, bootstrapped, funded yourself, businesses where you get a lot of revenue in from the get-go. We knew that we would have a lot of upfront costs in developing our software. We've built everything ourselves, so completely unique and proprietary code base. And that required getting investors on board who were as excited about the billion-dollar opportunity that we're really building for. Yeah.
right, yes, sure. If you're going to have that whole software infrastructure, probably continuing to develop that as well as you're put it in practice. Never ending, right?
Yeah, and good software engineers aren't cheap, right?
No, no, yeah. And what you want to talk a little bit about so did you go out and look for these venture capitalists and do your own personal roadshow, or did people come to you? How did that work?
Yeah, such a good question because I think it's one of the most opaque things often, partly through my early professional experiences at McKinsey and some through studying Harvard and MIT, got exposure to people in kind of venture capital in general and investors. I'd say to anyone raising money, a lot of this is a numbers game, right? If you only speak with 2 investors, guess what? Your chance of getting an investment is very low. If you speak with 100, if you get no's from everyone, it's probably because there's something wrong with the business or how you're building it. So went pretty disciplined in terms of raising our first round of capital, which was last year, December 2023, and also had quite a high bar on who we wanted to bring on as investors. So really wanted investors who knew our customers, the manufacturers, and really wanted investors who knew the built environment and understood large enterprises. So I'd also say we were lucky. We ended up getting oversubscribed, so more money offered than we needed, which is a great luxury. But that also allowed us to make sure we really got the best people on board.
Clients. So now you have this money going back. Maybe you had some in your back pocket, but how did you end up? You have revenue. Are you through building out you're in business with revenue? You have enough built out in your software that you're now helping
Yeah.
businesses? Yeah.
Yeah, it's no longer, I mean, I like to say a year ago or year and a half ago, right? Most things were a good idea. Now we have real software deployed with customers, adding value and generating these life cycle assessments. So that certainly is kind of like we've been able to scale very fast because it's very painful today, right? So the alternatives are pay a lot of money for people to do it slowly because they're doing it manually. I'd say, I mean, how do you get larger partners to sign up? For us, it's been a lot about one, showing that we're not just an kind of an overnight solution. So meeting up in person, building credibility, not just with myself, but with my co-founder and with our team. And then being willing to pilot our solution, showing, well, how could this look at a small scale? And then once you've shown some value, expanding and growing that. But we have all types of customers. I mean, I was just on the call with one of our ready-mix concrete customers in Staten Island, right? Who operates like on a smaller operations, all the way to a hard-pressed wood manufacturer that has 50 plus manufacturing sites across North America.
So talk a little bit about, so these companies have a need to measure sustainability. They're doing it the old-fashioned way. You help them do it with AI and many more things. Why do they have the need to measure that? Or why are they measuring that? It's a good thing to do because we all care about that. They're under some regulation to do that. They're under peer pressure, if you will, to do that. Or because I don't know that that was there, 50 years ago, right?
It certainly wasn't. I mean, I think first of all, and some people are gonna shake their heads at me saying this, but I think everything in climate is regulation. That is what drives everything. Because
Mhm.
ultimately it's new, it's costly, and it's complex, right? It's like the definition of something that's a headache for anyone to take on. That's not to say that there are not some incredibly passionate individuals out across organizations making big changes. But what really shifts the needle is a lot of the regulation. That regulation has a lot of different flavors in the US, right? So you have, Buy Clean Acts being rolled out across federal and lots of states, putting up requirements about purchasing of materials. But then you also have real estate companies that really care about getting particular building level certifications. And in order to get those, they need to make sure their suppliers have emission documents. And then you have a couple of individual big companies like Meta and Amazon and Google putting up really strict requirements for things around data centers, which means suddenly if you are making steel and you want to be selling into the growing data center business, you need to have these environmental product declarations. But it's regulation. That's ultimately what drives sustainability forward.
If you're talking to a potential client to dig into and some of the jargon and tell us like maybe something they would want to hear or maybe a success story. I mean, in environmental product declarations, I think it's pretty explanatory, but I'm sure there's a lot of definitions that VOCs, um, lots of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll give it a go, and then I want to hear your perspective, Henry, on what you think it is, because it's always helpful to get people who are not deep down in the kind of context matter. I mean, I think what we say more than anything is this isn't this isn't new, right? It's data that these companies already have, right? In order to create it's an environmental product declaration as a manufacturer, you need three things: your input materials, how it was transported to you, and your manufacturing process. And what we found out is most of this data already exists in their own data systems, right? You might not be counting the gallons, but someone sure is paying for the water. So then you go to the finance system. And operational efficiency has often kept lots of data about the actual manufacturing process. So what we find our partners are most excited about is that we are able to build APIs. So I think of it as like the digital road straight into their data systems. They don't have to do anything in terms of the structure of the data. And we can pull that out. And we've trained our large language model on ingesting and restructuring this data. So again, I mean, I asked one of our engineers, how long does this take on average? And he was like, well, between 30 and 45 seconds. And I was like, I can't tell a customer that. That sounds insane. but that is how fast we can pull that data.
Yeah, so to me, I guess I would describe it since you asked me is companies know how much power they use. They know where they get their power. Probably, maybe not always, but is it a coal-fired plant or are they using some regenerative power from their own production and their own manufacturing? Like a big company like International Paper, they create a lot of their own power. Is pollution, they're going to be regulated for pollution. And people say that's like a dirty word, and it is dirty, but it's the reality. Humans create pollution, drive our cars, whatever we do. So they're measuring their pollution, and are they where are they disposing of their chemicals that are all used up? Where are they disposing of water that is no longer clean? How much emissions are going up into the air? How much are they preventing from going up in the air with scrubbers and nets? And so from a layman's perspective, as not an expert on what you're doing, I could continue on, but it's things like that. And so they have that data. So I picture you coming in with AI and software, and instead of having accounting people document things in ledgers or Excel spreadsheets, pulling it all out of whatever they have and giving them some better tools to measure it, and then giving them suggestions based on your knowledge and based on what other companies are doing that you've learned from them. Because that's one of the great things about a consulting, which I know you know from McKinsey, is when you do a bunch of different companies, there's common issues and parameters, and you kind of learn from what's going on real time.
I
So
should hire you to pitch our company, Henry. You've clearly done this. You've clearly done this before. But I mean, that's exactly right.
Well, so what are you doing now to get new clients? Is it pretty well, you have something that's very scalable, as you mentioned, and it makes sense because software is one of the more scalable things there is. I'm sure you have some people requirements you'll have to scale up, but so yeah, where are you going now? Let's have fun and talk about the future, the dream, where you're going to be
Yeah,
in a few years, what your investors want you to do.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, I think of what we're building at Pathways as building the data layer for sustainable manufacturing, right? Buildings are like Lego. If you want to understand the emission footprint of the full building, you need to understand each of the bricks. And we're really in the business of generating the insight on each brick. We're still super early stage, right? And have brought on a bunch of customers and are super proud to be serving those. But if anyone is listening and know people in material manufacturing who are kind of struggling on anything sustainability, we always love a warm intro. And that's really what we're focused on right now. We are heads down developing and improving our product and scaling with customers. And you know, I'm imagining we'll be covering the vast majority of manufacturers when we're just looking a few years out from now. That certainly is the ambition.
there you go. And would you say that you can do what they're doing now better for the same cost? Or would you say it's a bit of a cost increase, but they get better results? Or would you say they potentially could save money or somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that for most of our customers, they end up saving money overall. The biggest expenses our customers are incurring is not, I mean, they pay tens of thousands of dollars to consultants. That is like an expense you alleviate right away. Right? But of course, then instead we sit at Pathways as a subscription. So there are costs there. I'd say the bigger one is when you ask a facility manager at a plant to input data for 30 hours, right? Which is very common. So the enormous internal costs of gathering all this information manually today is really where we're seeing the biggest alleviation. And once you start kind of adding up those numbers, that's a very clear saving. I'd say the other thing, and that's often where we start, is we speak with sales and marketing teams, and they're now able to use this information when they're selling the products. You know, I personally think it's much more fun to be in the business of revenue generation than cost saving, and most of our customers tend to agree.
Carbon credits is something that's pretty widely known, maybe more well known than EPDs and SOC requirements, et cetera, et cetera. Is that something that you all are involved in as well, or not really? That's not really a thing.
No, I mean, there's all kinds of things around carbon credits and how can you avoid or how can you kind of like, pay off or buy credits for your existing emissions. I'd say we're in the business of actually reducing the emissions.
Are generating carbon credits for a company so they can sell it off with the methodology. But yeah, you're trying to the negative, right? You don't want to have the carbon to start with if you can avoid it. Carbon footprint.
Exactly. I mean, we find our customers use us to actually decrease their footprint rather than kind of like buy credits to avoid the existing footprint. I know a lot of great companies in the carbon credit space and a lot of great projects doing kind of carbon credit, but that's not really where we are at Pathways.
Well, so to wrap up, Pathways. How did you come up with the name Pathways? I like the name very much. Um,
It was kind of at random. You know, we were talking about what our mission really was, and we kept going back to this idea of making the pathway for decarbonization visible for manufacturers that is so opaque and so difficult across a company. And that idea of like, if we can just help make the path, we believe that our customers are way smarter on actual decarbonization. In my experience, if you call up a plant manager, they know what the problems are, right? They don't need some kind of like highly intellectual solution to tell them. They know that where the heat is coming out or the water is more polluted. They're the experts. And for us, it's just about creating that visible path where they can then walk on.
Yeah, well, what a great name. And your focus is, I think, just from my view, really helpful too, because you know exactly what you want to do and you know who your clients are, and it's a massive market. So I can see why you would have a lot of big investors because using AI to pioneer that, hey, I'm a fan. So well done. And well, I look forward to staying in touch and hearing more about your success. And you seem to really be enjoying it. Such a positive person. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, it's a privilege to get to work on what I do and with our customers every day. It truly is like the greatest privilege of my life. So I couldn't be happier, and I'm very grateful, Henry, to be invited on here to chat with you about something I love.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, talk to you soon.